Acute versus chronic inflammation. As we know that the inflammation is the body attempt in order to protect against the infectious or invading agent. बॉडी में जो टिश्यू है उसका जो रिस्पॉन्स है अगेंस्ट सच काइंड ऑफ इन्फेक्शियस एजेंट इज कॉल्ड एज इन्फ्लेमेशन. सो देर आर टू डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ इन्फ्लेमेशन अकॉर्डिंग टू देयर रिस्पॉन्स टाइम. क्योंकि इन्होंने रिस्पॉन्ड करना है अगेंस्ट इन्फेक्शियस एजेंट, तो जितना कम रिस्पॉन्स टाइम होगा और जितना ज़्यादा रिस्पॉन्स टाइम होगा उसके अकॉर्डिंगली वी कैन कैटेगराइज द इन्फ्लेमेटरी प्रोसेस into acute as well as chronic inflammation. So let's begin with the acute inflammation. Acute inflammation is a short time process occurring in response to tissue injury. Means whenever there is an infection or infectious agent is there, so response time should be very limited. Means in a quick manner this kind of inflammatory process would be there. That's why it is called as acute. Acute means short term. Similarly, it appears in minutes to hours, means the short span between the entry of the inflammatory agent or infectious agent into the body, and as a result, the response would appear within the minutes to hours. So purely physical damage, and then there would be the healing. Means such kind of inflammatory processes, means acute inflammatory processes, it includes the physical damage, means physical damage to the skin, physical damage to any organ as a result of any stress, or you can say that any physical stimulus, or you can say that any other infectious agent. And as a result, whenever such kind of acute inflammatory process would be there, ultimate outcome for such kind of acute inflammatory process would be the healing. Means that injury or that damaged tissue has to be healed. Then activation of the immune system, because inflammatory process is a body attempt in order to protect against the infectious agent, so immune system has to play its important role. Similarly, in the acute inflammatory processes, the immune system, the activation of the various immune system is very, very critical. So three main processes are basically involved in the acute inflammatory process or acute inflammation. So what are those? So the first one is the increased blood flow, means the site where the inflammatory process has occurred, or at where this infectious agent has to enter, there is an increased blood flow would be there. The second is increased permeability. Permeability means that the blood vessel from where the blood is passing through, it will become more permeable. Permeable means that there would be the leakage of the blood cells, or you can say that the fluid outside of the tissue. And the third one is the migration of the leukocytes, means how the leukocytes, they have just to travel, because those are inflammatory cells, and those has just to move towards the site of inflammation. So the increased blood flow means that whenever the blood vessels, they would be dilated. Vasodilatation process means whenever there is an infectious agent enter, so as a response, the blood vessels, they will dilate, and whenever they will dilate, that means that there would be more surface area in order to flow the blood, and as a result there would be an increased blood flow in the infected region, in that particular infected region. So that's why the first of the important significant symptom of the inflammatory process is redness, क्योंकि वहाँ पे blood की supply बढ़ जाएगी. Another important thing is that redness of the infected area due to this increased blood flow. Then increase in the temperature as in the infected area, because there would be the increased blood flow, so energy would be there, so temperature would increase. You can say that in a form of a fever, because there are certain cytokines, they are also being involved. जो cytokines हैं for temperature maintain करने, they are also going to be flow at that site, so there would be the increase in the body temperature, means fever condition would be there. Then the second important thing is the increased permeability. Permeability means that the blood vessels where the blood has just to pass through, so they become permeable. They become porous in such a way that the blood components, means blood flow or the leakage of the plasma into the tissue interstitium, means जो blood vessel के surrounding tissue है, वहाँ पे plasma जो blood fluid है, it would leak, it would go inside in it. That's why it will causes the accumulation of the fluid in that particular tissue. वहाँ पे accumulate कर जाएगा, और as a result of that accumulation, you can see that a condition would be there that is called as edema. Edema मतलब swelling of the affected area due to additional accumulation of the fluid into interstitial space or region. For example, here in this figure, you can see that this is the blood vessel, and the capillary, or inside the capillary, the blood cells are also be there. The blood is moving towards, and as a result, whenever the blood vessel become permeability, you can see that in between the cells of the blood vessel, like endothelium, so the junction between the two endothelial cell will become wider. जब वो वाइड हो जाएंगे तो यहाँ से ब्लड फ्लो करेगा आउटसाइड, और आउटसाइड जो फ्लूइड है, जो प्लाज्मा है, इट विल मूव आउट, एंड एज अ रिजल्ट ये प्लाज्मा एक्यूमुलेट हो जाएगा इनटू द सराउंडिंग टिश्यू, और जब ये एक्यूमुलेट हो जाएगा तो उस एरिया में स्वेलिंग हो जाएगी, एंड दैट स्वेलिंग रीजन और इज कॉल्ड एज अडीमा. दैट इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. ओके, नेक्स्ट, as a result, there is another important thing, means edema would be there, or endothelial cells, they are going to separate it out in order to leak that fluid. Then the migration of the leukocytes. Chemotaxis is a process by which the leukocyte move toward the site of the inflammatory process. Means कुछ chemicals move करेंगे in the form of a cytokines. They are playing their very important role. Cytokines क्या करेंगे? Leukocytes पे effect करेंगे, और they will attract the leukocyte towards the site of infection through the process of adhesion. First of all, adhesion होगी. Like in this figure, you can see that this leukocyte, it is going to adhere on the surface of endothelial. And whenever it is going to adhere on the surface of endothelial, it is roll. And as a result, afterward, there would be the diapedesis, means there would be the squeezing of the leukocyte in between the junction of the two endothelial cells, and it will move towards the site of infection as a result of the chemotactic factors. So this is very important. So chemotaxis is a process by which all these leukocyte or inflammatory cells, they are moving towards the site of infection. So expression of the adhesion molecules on the vessel as well as leukocyte. जो ब्लड वेसल है उसकी सरफेस पे भी एडिशन मॉलिक्यूल्स का एक्सप्रेशन हाई हो रहा है, और ऑन दी अदर हैंड जो ल्यूकोसाइट्स हैं उनकी सरफेस पे भी एडिशन मॉलिक्यूल्स दे आर अप रेगुलेटेड, एंड दैट्स व्हाई देयर इज एन adhesion between the leukocyte and the blood vessel. So that is very important. Now, the chronic inflammation. So last we have just discussed about the acute inflammation. Now the chronic inflammation. Chronic means that it is a prolonged form of inflammation. In contrast to acute, that is a very short time, very short span. But here there is a long time and a slow process occurring in response to tissue injury. So it can last from months to even years. As in comparison to the acute, जो कि minutes or hours में हो रही थी, but here inflammatory process is very prolonged. Months से years तक it can prolong. The hallmark of the chronic inflammation is the immune cells or inflammatory cells like macrophages and the lymphocyte, because the neutrophils, which are very important in acute inflammatory process. The neutrophils are short-lived. That's why they are just to play their role in acute inflammation, in inflammatory process, while the macrophage and the lymphocyte, they have just to play their important role in chronic inflammation. So the two types of the chronic inflammation process, the first is non-specific and proliferative inflammation. The second is granulomatous inflammation. So the proliferative is a non-specific inflammatory process. It is characterized by the presence of the non-specific granulation tissue. Means जो soft tissues है वहाँ पे granulation हो जाएगी, fibrosis हो जाएगी, and as a result infiltration of the mononuclear cells like monocytes, plasma cell, and leukocyte, they will infiltrate, वहाँ पे जाएंगे, और as a result proliferation of the fibroblast क्या करेंगे, fibrosis होगी, और वहाँ पे जो tissue है, soft tissue, it would get hard, और there would be the accumulation of all the immune cells, and as a result there would be a response that is called as abscess formation. Abscess, like in pus formation हो जाएगी, proliferation of the connective tissue and the vessel. For example, in case of the lung abscess, here in this figure you can see that the lung tissue is being there, and the lung abscess here in this region, there is a proliferation of the connective tissue and the fibrosis, and as a result the pus has been accumulated in that particular area, that is called as the lung abscess. This is a very important example of the non-specific proliferative inflammatory process. Now the granulomatous. Granulomatous means, as the name suggests, that granuloma. Granuloma means that it is characterized by the distinct nodular tissues. Nodules बन जाएंगे body पे. और वो nodules किस शक्ल के होंगे? Like on the skin, you can see that. Here, in this figure, you can see that the nodules are being there. They are elevated region on the skin or on the organs. That's why. Granuloma, the aggregation of the activated macrophages with their derived cells called epithelioid cells. Here you can see that granuloma. यहाँ पे ये cells, they are going to form a granuloma. Large cells हैं, epithelioid cells हैं, और इसके गिर्द बहुत से lymphocytes हैं. So this structure is called as granuloma. Or the granuloma, it is an abnormal form or the hallmark of the chronic inflammatory process. Or afterward, whenever such kind of infectious granuloma due to infection, for example, tuberculosis and the leprosy, they are the example of the granulomatous chronic inflammatory process. Here in this figure, we have just summarized or difference between acute and the chronic inflammatory process. In acute, there is an innate immune response, while in chronic inflammatory, there is an adaptive immune response. And as a result, the stimulus will be there would be the healing, or you can say that immune cell help to healing in acute inflammatory process, while in adaptive inflammatory process, it's going on stimulus. Immune system activate hoga, healing hogi, and as a result, inflammatory process will change to different cell or repeated cycle increase the disease, and it's a cycle process, ongoing process. So that's the basic difference between the acute and the chronic inflammatory process.